Hey guys, Philosopher here, and today we're going to discuss how to build your Ravagers. I'm going to go through T4s, I'm going to go through gear priority, ISO, the whole 9 yards, and we're going to be unveiling our new infographic, which is linked below. But what I'm going to do here is walk through it with you and make sure you understand how and why I made the decisions that I did. One thing I'm just going to say as a starting point is I invested in this team because I'm a content creator and I was trying to build everything so at least I could give you an intelligent view on this team. And I've used it quite a bit. I've used the team in War a lot on War offense. I faced it sometimes when people threw it on War defense for some reason I don't know. I've also used some of the individual characters in Doom Raid in the tech section. I've used T'Challa, for example, and I've screwed around with a couple of the other characters. I also have been getting feedback from people who've used T'Challa and Ravager Stitcher in DD5. And by the way, who have liked the result because they're both pretty cheap characters to gear. They are on my DD5 infographic. But let's talk about how to build the team here. And one thing I'm just going to say in terms of the performance of the team is I think it's an above average War offense team. It's actually pretty good, better than I think we anticipated. And it's a team that if you know how to use it and which teams to use it against and what teams to not use it against, you're going to get a lot of mileage out of it. This team does very well when it has a chance to get rolling. And I will essentially, the way it works, some of the things that are really important features of this team is T'Challa has got steals energy and blinds a character up front, which is important. And then I think an important component to the entire team is that the team does a great job of it steals buffs, it spreads buffs, they extend buffs. They're great in terms of building up buffs over time. And they also, Yondu summons very early on an additional Ravager Stitcher and Ravager Boomer. And the Ravager Boomer has a turn meter rewind that can help get your team ahead of the other team. Ravager Stitcher ultimately has a health steal and some other helpful things in his kit. What I just find over time with this team is that once they get rolling, they do well. So they do very well against teams that don't clear their buffs, that have buffs to steal, for example, and teams that give them time to get rolling. If a team sort of just overwhelms them very early on, they don't get rolling. Let's talk, though, about, I'm going to go right to the infographic. I'm going to show it once again, by the way, Punk, who is the guy who does all my infographics, just really outdid himself with this. Did a fantastic job. I do have more infographics, by the way, on the way. There will be a Young Avengers infographic coming out in the not too distant future. We've already had Web Warriors. And, but I do always take time to play the team extensively first. I don't trust those infographics that come out before the team is even in the game. This is something that I've done with a lot of gameplay. So let's go right here. I'm going to start with the essential T4s. And the first one here at the very top, you could see it right here in the right, is the T'Challa special. And, this one to me is really a no-brainer because a big part of what he does is this ability energy steal. And this gives you the ability to steal 2 as opposed to stealing 1 energy. So I think this is, pretty much a must-have and really core to him. If you take off this energy stealing piece, he's basically a single target damager. I mean, he's got a high damage stat and he does some other stuff, but that's a big part of what he does. And so to me, that's just absolutely core. And if you're using this team, you're going to want that because that's something really special he does. He can shut down a key character, particularly like Silver Surfer. He shuts down really well. The next one is the Yondu special, and you may say, wait, why Yondu? Why is that special so important? Well, to me, that T4 is what, this is what makes sure that you always summon 2 summons. And like I said in the beginning, a lot of what gets this team ahead is that there's going to be multiple Ravager Boomers, okay, who are going to be rewinding turn meter, for example. Now, people do ask me, well, wait, how is the T4s on the summon determined? They're determined by the T4s you have in Yondu. So if you have the special, it also gives the special to the summons. The reason I'm mentioning it here is that's also part of the reason why putting the special on Yondu is important, because it gives the T4 the special, the T4 for the summons as well, which is great because it gives you extra turn meter removal. So to me, this is just an absolutely core T4 to the team. It's the way that you make sure you get your summons out and you get your turn meter removal and get yourself ahead of the opponent. It's really kind of core to making the team work, which is what essential T4s should be all about. All right, the next two are T'Challa, passive, and ultimate. So let's talk a little bit about those and why they're so important. You know, if you go to the passive here, this gives 25% health to the team. I mean, I think that's just a no-brainer, right? Giving a lot of health to the team is just, great. And it's one of those things that you can't screw up, right? It's just tons of extra stats. So that's a good thing. The ultimate, really important because it copies all effects from adjacent allies. So that's really nice. So he's going to be increasing the duration and so forth, but being able to copy all the effects from adjacent allies is really good because you're going to place him. I'm going to talk more about positioning later, but you're going to place him between Bruiser and Yondu, who both are going to be building up a lot of buffs. He's going to copy them all and then increasing duration. And that's just going to make him really strong. And he is the big damager on your team. So you want him to be all buffed up. You want him to be survivable as well. And he needs those buffs to do it because he's a little bit of a glass cannon. All right. Next, we've got the Boomer passive and then the Boomer special. So why do we care about getting the passive on Ravager Boomer? In particular, why is he such an important character? Well, first of all, the passive means that he always assists non-minion Ravager allies. So this fits into our ISO here. So we've got, if you look at the ISO setup, this is on the infographic as well. So I've got Boomer as a skirmisher and Yondu as a striker. Because they always assist whenever Yondu attacks, Boomer will assist and you'll get a triple tap. So Yondu will attack, then Boomer will attack because he's an assist, then Yondu will attack again because there's a vulnerable. It's a very nice triple tap interaction. You may be wondering, why not have T'Challa as a striker? And the answer is, basically because the skirmisher on him is so good in terms of giving extra focus. You really want to make sure. So you get 50% focus if he's a skirmisher. That focus helps you land the blind. If you don't land the blind on this special, you don't steal the ability energy, which is kind of the whole point. If your T'Challa is huge, if you got a 7 red star, gear tier 16 T'Challa, then I can see having him as a striker, and then you're going to get that triple tap. However, what I would just say is, you better make sure that your T'Challa is really going to land that blind because it's going to create a problem for you if you're counting on T'Challa to, let's say, shut down Silver Surfer and he just gets a resist, right? So that's why we have the setup he does. But then the point is with Boomer, being able to always assist means that you definitely know you're going to have a reliable triple tap. That's why that special is important. Let's talk about his passive. So there's his passive. The special, why is the special important? The special is important for the reason I mentioned up front. Reducing the speed bar by those 3 characters, the primary and secondary targets on this attack, is part of what gets this team going. So getting that additional 10% off, I think, is really important. In my experience running the team, and this is why, like I said, these infographics are different than my initial impressions. I always give you guys my initial impressions, but the infographics are, hey, I've played the team a lot. This is how it works. And in my experience, being able to have the 30% reduction here and then another 30% from the summon, Boomer summon, is a huge part of what gets this team going because you basically get out ahead of the opposing team. So that just makes it really important. All right. Now, let's talk about the nice to have T4s. So if you notice here, I only have 6 essential T4s because I really think you could get away with, if you're and a lot of players are on a budget right now with this team. This is a team that, in my opinion, you can get away with fewer T4s on. It does a lot better, and you can do a lot more with the team if you have more T4s. You're going to see I have a lot of T4s on the team because my alliance gets high raid season and this and that. I have a lot. You get a lot of T4s from that, and the game has been giving those out more recently, T4s. But if you're tight on T4s, I think you can get by with these 6. I wouldn't do it with less than those 6, but I think you can get by with those 6. The next one I have is the bruiser passive. The reason I have the bruiser passive, and this I think matters more if you have a smaller team, is he gives defense up to the entire team for 2 turns instead of 1 turn on spawn, and I think that's really helpful because to me, what that means. To me, what that means is that, and by the way, the entire team gets 25% armor, which reduces damage as well. And the defense up gives you 50% less damage incoming, and 50% higher resistance. So to me, that's just really good for the survivability of the team. All right. Next one I have is the Yondu passive. I considered putting this one higher. And here's the thing with the Yondu passive. So it says if enemy has blind, copy and clear all of their positive effects, which is nice. And then in war, 20% focus for each Ravager ally. So this last part, the focus, I don't think is really necessary on him. In other words, it's nice, but not essential. But why is it so high up? So that's why I didn't do it. I mean, to me, on its own, this is not essential. That's why it's not higher. But why do I have it here? Well, because it impacts the summons. Like I mentioned before, having the passive there means that Ravager Boomer always assists. So your summon will always assist and get the triple tap with Yondu, for example. It also means that your Ravager Stitcher is going to apply regen for 2 turns and so forth. So I think it's nice. It's nice to have the passive here just for that purpose. It's in the nice to have category, and that's where I have it. Okay. All right, next, we've got the Bruiser Special. So the Bruiser Special is another survivability piece. And really it depends on, how big your team is and how much it's punching up and that sort of thing. I'm usually facing really big teams and where it's punching up for me. And so to me, being able to get defense up on this special is really nice. It's really nice. So I like it for that reason. Now, technically speaking, if you apply this T4, you could argue that you don't really need the passive, right? Because you're generally going to be using your special on turn 1 anyway. So, if you already get defense up for 1 turn, then you do this for another turn. Well, I think the armor alone is important enough to do the passive, even if you're doing the special. And I think that you sometimes are in a situation where you get ability blocked or some other reason you're stunned or whatever, and you don't get this off. So I think this just adds yet another assurance of survivability. If, for example, that initial defense up gets cleared, this guy puts it every other turn on your entire team. That defense up really helps a lot in terms of survivability. I like defense up a lot. 50% less damage is good for me. And so I think it's important. All right, the next one is an interesting one. I have here the Ravager Stitcher Basic. And I have to say, I really debated this one. I did put this on here. I considered it. I considered what to do with this one because I think this one is we're starting to get into, how nice to have is it? Why am I doing this? Well, here's the thing. The reason I have this is because it makes the ISO attack stronger. And 60% piercing is significant. But there's this beautiful line here. Characters killed by this attack can't be revived. Okay, so that's really nice because you want the basic to be as strong as possible. So you have a situation where you're going to be getting kills, right? The other thing, though, that's important is Ravager Stitcher has a really awesome ISO attack, which I'm going to show here. And the ISO attack is way better than the regular attack. And what it says here, if you look at it, so, 176% piercing damage and 70% chance to apply heal block. And if the primary target is defense down, it attacks for way more. And characters killed by the ISO attack also can't be revived. If you go here, it really pumps up this attack. I think this is a very nice ISO attack. That's why he's a striker, because it's such a nice ISO attack. And I think pumping it up is, quote, nice to have. Is it, super important? No. It's in the nice to have category. It's the 10th one on here. We're starting to get to the point where this is where if you want to go really hard on this team, what you do. Now, people might say, I think an argument could be made that the next one is more important It's close, I think. This is the Yondu Ultimate, which gives 80% piercing to the whole team. And a lot of my alliance mates have this, or a bunch of them do. My view has been that by the time I get to this Ultimate, which is turn 2, I usually have the match is decided. In other words, it's rare for me that this move is like the decisive move. Like you need that blind to land, you need to get the initial stuff with the summons and stealing the buffs and slowing the enemy down. But by the time you're AoEing and everyone, this is usually where the match is like you've won the whole match, or you're so far behind, or whatever's happened. So this to me has never been a priority. So that's why I have it a little lower on it. But it's nice. I mean, I don't think the focus is really necessary, but 80% piercing to all is very nice to have, and that's why it's where it is on the list. All right, next is the Bruiser Basic. And the Bruiser Basic, I will go to that now here just so you could see it. Whoops. The Bruiser Basic basically says plus 100 damage to the primary target, which is nice. And then if the primary target is a protector, apply Disrupted. That's nice. It can be useful in certain matchups. So you can imagine for certain counters, getting to a key disrupt out there is good, and being able to basic on turn 1, especially if you have the passive done, he's going to already have defense up on the team. That could be useful. But it's very situational to me. That's the definition of nice to have, right? Only matters if you're going to go for a protector first. Only matters if you really want to get disrupted on him. By the way, shout out to Proler for being the one that convinced me about the Yondu base, the Stitcher Basic. All right, Bruiser Basic. There we go. Now the next two are the Stitcher Special. If we go here, the Stitcher Special and the Stitcher Passive. And if we go in, we can go take a look at it here. The Stitcher Special. This is, to me, very much in the very optional category. 2% healing for each target. So this move is really awesome. Does a lot of damage, stealing 10% health from the primary target, and then and redistributing it to the most injured ally, then doing it again. So it's really a total of 20% health steal, which is very, very, very nice. So this just gives an additional 2% healing, okay, which is healing the most injured ally for, instead of 8%, it would be 10% of this character's max health. I mean, this is nice, but I've never felt like I needed a little more healing off of this. So your mileage may vary. You may find this more important than I do. I just have not seen this as important at all. And then we have the Stitcher Passive. It's the last in the nice to have category. This is regen for 2 turns. Applying regen on spawn for 2 turns is nice. It does add some additional survivability because regen is essentially healing that happens on your turn. It can be very nice, particularly if you have a big Stitcher, but this is a definition of nice to have. I mean, if your team, is, it's like maybe for massive punch-ups, it's very hard for me to see this being a big difference maker. I don't know a lot of people who have done it. And then we go to the 2 kind of worthless ones, or the meh ones, the 3 worthless ones, the T'Challa Basic, Yondu Basic, and Boomer Basic. So let's talk about those. T'Challa Basic, to start with, you're going to laugh. I did it because I got convinced by somebody in my chat to do it. Like, oh, you maxed out everything else in T'Challa. Why don't you max out this? I'm like, fine. So I did. It's just 140% damage. That's really all it is. He's a high damager, so be it. I did it just to max him out, but I don't really think, getting extra damage in the basic, which you're not going to use for the first couple turns. You do use it a decent amount because he does get extra turns over time due to his passive. So that is one thing he does. He gets, whenever an enemy dies that's not a summon, he gets 30% speed bar. So he tends to take a lot of turns. So you do use his basic a decent amount, but I don't think it's that important. Yondu Basic, similarly, not very important. Additional 40% damage and 5% piercing to one target. I mean, And then the Boomer Basic, I have a similar view, is really not all that important. In the scheme of things, this is always applying slow versus 75%, 40% damage. You don't use this that much. He's got a very short cooldown on this, so I don't see it. So those are the T4s. Let's talk a little bit about positioning for a second. So why this positioning here? And the reason why is you really want T'Challa to be copying the positive effects from Bruiser and Yondu. Okay, so so Yondu, for example, he's doing cool stuff like on his turn, he's copying positive effects, all right, from each enemy and then clearing them. And so he's going to have a lot of positive effects. And then Bruiser is going to be copying positive effects. So, to me, this is, I think, where you want to have T'Challa, because if you have him in between the two, what he does is on, not here, it's actually on his ultimate. He copies all positive effects from adjacent allies. So to me, you really want him between the two characters, Bruiser and Yondu, who are, copying all these positive effects. So that's really the important thing. And then we're keeping Stitcher all the way in the end because he's sort of the healer of the group. So that's the positioning there. That's the reasoning there. We've already talked, I think, about the ISO class. As I said before, we've got 3 boomers in here. I'm going to have to change that before this is released. But essentially, they are the way that so it won't look this in the infographic you see below. But Boomer is going to be skirmisher because he's going to be because he's going to be assisting when Yondu and T'Challa are doing their attacks. Bruiser is a skirmisher because, frankly, he is a character that his ISO attack isn't important, and so giving him getting an additional source of vulnerables is nice on the team, and he's also the getting the additional focus is fine. He also gives you the reason you want to have extra vulnerables is because you're also going to have these vulnerables are going to get eaten up on the triple tap. But Stitcher, you want to be able to be making use of that awesome ISO attack that we talked about earlier. Now let's talk about gear priority, which I got at the very top, which is right there. So why this gear priority? Well, my thought process is, T'Challa is your damager, and you need him big because you need his focus high so he lands the blinds and can steal the energy. If you don't have that, really no point in using that character. Yondu, the nice thing about having him large is that having him bigger makes the summons bigger. And you want the summons big enough to, maybe live a turn or two. I've actually had my summons last, to the end. You end up building a little mini army, and that can get a steamroll going. So I think, Yondu is great for that reason. And then to me, Boomer, he's a damager in addition to being a guy who is taking away turn meter. And then to me, in terms of survivability, Stitcher is the next most important. Stitcher is a character that you like to have alive because he's going to be doing all that health steal and so forth pretty frequently. Okay, that health steal move is literally every other turn. Basically, it's like it's going to be going. It's every third turn. And then Bruiser, to me, he copies buffs, and he's just basically there to keep everyone else alive with his defense up. He's not as important. He's just a buff copier / defense up specialist who throws vulnerables on. If the enemy attacks him, great, but, whatever. To me, he's the least important in this team. Over time, you're going to build up an army of Ravagers via summons and things like that, and if you get to a point where his survivability matters, you probably have already won or lost the match. All right, so that's the infographic. It's linked below. Hopefully you like that. All of my infographics are linked below. And like I said, they do come out a little after the team. I know it's been a little time, since it's been a month or whatever it's been since we got the Ravagers, the last Ravager out. But I really like to test this team out, and this is a team I have built. It's a team I have used, and it's these recommendations I feel pretty confident in. It's also used. I also use the input of other players as well, including folks on my stream. Thanks to all of them, including some of the folks I mentioned. All right, guys, if you like this video, smash that like button. Subscribe to this channel. If you got comments, questions, cheers, put them below, or go to my Discord. That's linked below. You can also go to my Twitch stream. That is linked below too.